You reach for a small plastic wrapper without thinking. You barely register it. Your grandmother's grandmother would have found the object inside that wrapper almost unbelievable. But the real answer to how women managed this every single month for hundreds of thousands of years is far stranger than anything sitting in your bathroom cabinet right now. Your body has been doing this for a long time. Longer than agriculture, longer than language, some researchers argue. And for nearly all of that time, there was no product at all. Just skill, just knowledge, just women teaching women. Think about what that actually means in practice. No pharmacy, no factory, no packaging designer testing absorbency in a lab. Just a body doing what bodies have done for hundreds of thousands of years. And a mind figuring out, on the spot, with whatever the land offered, how to work with it instead of against it. That is a harder problem than it sounds. Consider the scale of it. A woman living 40 years past puberty experiences roughly 450 menstrual cycles across her lifetime, according to estimates used by reproductive researchers studying pre-industrial fertility patterns. 450 separate moments where a solution had to already exist, already be practiced, already be reliable. Not once. Not occasionally. Every month, for decades, across every single woman in every single band of early humans walking the earth. That is not a footnote in human history. That is a constant, quiet engineering problem running underneath the entire species. Start with the obvious question. What did women actually use? The answer depends entirely on where they lived. In the cold forests of ancient Europe, women used moss. Sphagnum moss holds up to 20 times its weight in liquid. It grows everywhere. It is naturally soft. Archaeologists have found it used for wound dressing across the ancient world. And anthropologists studying traditional societies have documented its use as an absorbent material for menstruation as well. In warmer climates, the material changed. Softened bark, grass, shredded plant fiber rolled and packed. In coastal regions, dried seaweed. Every environment handed women a different toolkit, and every toolkit got refined generation after generation until it worked. Notice the pattern hiding inside all of it. Every single one of these materials required knowledge that had nothing to do with menstruation on the surface. Which moss holds liquid without falling apart? Which bark softens without splintering? Which grass can be twisted tightly enough to stay in place through a full day of walking, hunting, gathering, carrying a child? This was not guesswork repeated blindly. This was tested, refined, and taught, the same way flint knapping or fire starting was tested, refined, and taught. Wrong to imagine this was primitive. A body of botanical knowledge this precise does not appear by accident. It appears through generations of trial, failure, adjustment, and careful transmission from an older woman to a younger one, at exactly the moment the younger one needed it most. Ancient Egypt gives you real documentation. The Ebers Papyrus, dated to around 1550 BC, contains medical instructions for women, including references to softened papyrus used internally. Egyptian women had access to one of the most advanced textile cultures on Earth. They used it. Ancient Greece pushes the sophistication further. Hippocrates, writing around 400 BC, described lint wrapped around small pieces of wood, used internally by women. That is, functionally, a tampon. 2,400 years before the cardboard applicator. Sit with that timeline for a second. The modern tampon, patented in the 1930s, gets marketed as a breakthrough of the industrial age. The concept behind it is closer to 2,500 years old. What changed was not the idea. What changed was the material, the manufacturing, and the packaging around it. Question: why does this surprise you? Because modern culture tells a quiet lie. It suggests ancient people were disgusted by this, ashamed of it, hiding from it in confusion. The archaeological and anthropological record tells a different story. Women solved this problem the same way they solved every other problem their bodies presented. Directly, practically, without panic. Rome shows you the same pattern. Roman women used wool, sometimes treated, packed for absorbency, changed and washed for reuse. Reuse mattered. Nothing was disposable in the ancient world, so the materials women chose had to survive washing, drying, and use again. That single constraint shaped centuries of design. Think about what reuse actually demands. A material has to be washable without falling apart. It has to dry quickly enough to be usable again within a day or two. It has to be soft enough for the body but sturdy enough to survive repeated scrubbing against rock or river water. Roman wool met every one of those requirements, which is exactly why it persisted as the material of choice across an empire that stretched from Britain to North Africa. None of this required a factory. It required attention. Here is the twist your brain did not expect. Menstruation was not something ancient societies simply endured. In many, it was structured, formalized, given social rules, spaces, and meaning. The anthropologist Chris Knight, in his research on early human social organization, argued that menstrual cycles among women in close social groups may have shaped some of the earliest cooperative behaviors in human bands. Tying female physiological rhythms to shifts in group activity and resource sharing. His theory remains debated among anthropologists, but the underlying observation is not controversial at all. Menstruation was never invisible to early human societies. It was central to how many of them organized time itself. Consider the so-called menstrual hut, documented by ethnographers across dozens of unrelated cultures on nearly every continent. Separate structures, used specifically during menstruation. Modern retellings frame these as symbols of shame and exile. That framing misses something. Beverly Strassman, a biological anthropologist at the University of Michigan, spent years studying the Dogon people of Mali, one of the few remaining societies where menstrual huts remain in active use. Her research found that women did not experience these spaces as punishment. They experienced them as rest, as female-only time, away from domestic labor, away from husbands, away from constant demands. Strassman's data also allowed her to calculate something remarkable. Using hut attendance records to estimate ovulation timing and fertility patterns across an entire community, essentially reconstructing reproductive biology from social behavior alone. Read that again. A building built around menstruation became precise enough data to reconstruct fertility science. Strassman tracked hut attendance among Dogon women for years, logging which women entered and when. From that single, simple record, she was able to calculate cycle length, timing of ovulation, and even detect early pregnancy loss across an entire community, all without a single blood test or hormone panel. A wooden structure, built from local materials, functioned as a fertility monitoring system more consistent than many clinical records kept in modern hospitals. That is not primitive. That is systems thinking, built by women, for women, centuries before anyone wrote it down in a journal. Your body still remembers pieces of this history, even if your daily life has erased the visible parts of it. The instinct to want rest during your period. The instinct to withdraw slightly, to want quiet, to want space. Modern life frames that as inconvenient. Ancient social structures frequently built entire rooms around honoring exactly that instinct. Here is where the story gets uncomfortable for modern assumptions. Shame, as most people experience it today, is not ancient at all. Historians tracing menstrual attitudes across cultures generally point to specific religious and later industrial era shifts as the true origin of secrecy and disgust, not some universal prehistoric instinct. Ancient practicality got rebranded over centuries into modern silence. Your ancestors talked about this openly, prepared for it collectively, and passed down specific plant knowledge from mother to daughter the same way they passed down which berries were poisonous and which roots could be eaten raw. This was survival information, treated with the same seriousness as fire or shelter. Nothing shameful survives that kind of transmission chain for 300,000 years. Compare that to how the conversation happens today. Whispered, coded in euphemism. Hidden inside a sleeve up a jacket on the way to a bathroom. Historians studying Victorian-era medical literature point directly to that period as a turning point, where menstruation shifted from a practical female matter into something framed by male physicians as illness, weakness, even hysteria. The word hysteria itself comes from the Greek word for uterus. That is not a coincidence. That is centuries of medical authority quietly reshaping how an entire half of the population was taught to view their own bodies. Ancient women did not inherit that framing. They inherited practical knowledge instead. Now think about disposability, because this is where the ancient story quietly outperforms the modern one. Every material used by ancient women, moss, bark, wool, linen, was reusable or fully biodegradable. Modern disposable products create enormous long-term waste, something researchers studying menstrual product environmental impact have flagged repeatedly in recent decades. Ancient women, working purely from necessity, built a system with almost zero waste. Not because they were environmentalists, because nothing else was available, and scarcity forced elegant solutions. Sometimes the oldest answer and the most modern answer end up pointing at the same target. Modern reusable pads, menstrual cups, period underwear. All of it, in principle, mirrors what women were already doing before written history began. Humanity did not invent sustainable menstrual management. It forgot it, then rediscovered it, wrapped in new marketing. One more layer, and this is the part that reframes everything. Menstruation, across evolutionary history, is genuinely unusual. Humans are one of only a small number of mammal species that menstruate in the way we do, alongside a handful of other primates and a few bat species. Most mammals reabsorb the uterine lining instead of shedding it. Researchers studying the evolution of menstruation, including work referenced by reproductive biologist Deborah Lynn Duke, propose that shedding the lining may protect against certain reproductive risks and energy costs tied to preparing for pregnancy every cycle. Your body is not malfunctioning once a month. It is running one of the rarer reproductive strategies in the entire animal kingdom. That is not something to hide. That is something closer to remarkable. Stand back from all of it for a second. Moss in a Paleolithic forest, softened papyrus along the Nile, wool in a Roman household, a hut in Mali, precise enough to map fertility. None of these are separate stories. They are the same story, repeated by women solving the same problem with whatever their world gave them. Generation after generation, without instructions, without products, without shame. You reach for a small plastic wrapper without thinking. Somewhere behind that simple motion sits 300,000 years of women figuring this out first.